our message today as we revisit this very odd and difficult passage. I'll give you that Jenny just read. And of course, the question for you is, if you had a miracle, what would that be? And here there's no way for me to preach on this subject that Jenny just read, which is very abstract, without really addressing the whole situation of John chapter 6. And so I broke it down into 4 different sections, and here's what I gathered is there is a time in life where we are wanting a miracle. In fact, some of you right now, at this very moment, are wanting a miracle. That cure, that peace, that health, that wealth, that lottery, that miracle, just boom. And it's a human condition. We are, in fact, Ecclesiastes tells us that we are people of eternity in our heart, but yet we've got this temporality of the mind. And so there is always that, in another sense, a hole in our heart and a longing for more. And so there is a moment that in our miracle, we get a morsel. I had mentioned just briefly of Dan and Paula's morsel that you received of joy. These are the things, I think, that build miracles of peace and comfort. It may not be the lottery. It may not be we're going to just grow a foot taller tomorrow morning, but it's something that we can feed upon and be nourished by. And sometimes, and this is the great danger of wanting a miracle, is we have these morsels of miracles, but then we miss out on that, and we feel like there is something missing, and there's a danger there. And then last, we reject the morsels of little nuggets of joy, and then finally, what would it look like to receive those morsels? So let's go ahead and begin. Here is the situation in 34 verses. I'm going to do my best to summarize this. If you recall, this story that Jenny just read is prefaced by Jesus feeding the 5,000. It's one of few stories that are told throughout the Gospels, all 4 Gospels. And this front portion is dominated by a need and a longing for a miracle. In fact, it's used 4 times. The word miracle can also be a sign. And so I'm just going to briefly look at some of those. People were following Jesus at this time, everywhere he went, because they saw these miracles in other people's lives. The lame are walking, the blind are seeing, the deaf are hearing, and so on and so forth. And so, of course, naturally, we see that and we want that. That's just a normal experience. And so they're following Jesus everywhere, and they want that miracle. And then, verse 14, the miracle happens in their life. But it was a miracle that they were not expecting or anticipating, so they wanted more. And that miracle, of course, was Jesus fed 5,000. They saw with their own eyes how Jesus, only had 5 loaves and 2 fish. You remember how the story goes. He blessed it, he gave it to his disciples, and then they ate, and they were full. They were satisfied. And it wasn't necessarily the lottery or them growing a foot taller. And I want to say, our kids are just that non-gun-shy example of what it means to be present and vulnerable, and I just love it. So thank you. And I know I always go back to their responses for this reason, because sometimes as adults we might think that but not want to say it, and they do, and I love that. And so sometimes we're wanting this miracle, and God provides, and we want more. Because in this case, it was something very simple. They were just simply fed. They weren't hungry. God met their basic needs, and then he, of course, taught them his word. And so right in the middle of this miracle, of the 4 different examples, Jesus says this. He says, you are wanting and looking. He's talking to the people now. You're wanting and searching and looking high and low for this miracle, but all you need is a morsel. That is profound. Verse 27. And Jesus gave them that, by the way. And then the people say, well, give us more of this so we can believe. And that's where things start to change. And they say this quote in verse 34, give us this bread always. It sounds a little like the Lord's Prayer, give us this daily bread, which is true, but he also speaks at the Sermon on the Mount. But this is also very reflective of 2 chapters before in the Gospel of John. I want to give you a little. So we're in John chapter 6. John chapter 4 is the woman at the well. And in a very similar sense, this woman says, Jesus, give me this water that refreshes. Because she's at the well, she's thirsty, she's in need, and God provides. And we have another echo of that. Rather than give me this drink to drink so that I may never thirst, now they're saying, give me this bread that I may never hunger. They're looking at it in a very physical sense. Now Jesus is about to turn things just like he did with the woman at the well. He's not talking about bread that will cause us to never be hungry again. He's not talking about even so much of physical wellness in our life right now. God knows our needs. He knows we have needs. But he's talking something much richer and fulfilling. And so this first part of the chapter is dominated by, I need a miracle. I want a miracle. Even when the miracle comes, we miss the miracle. And we want more of a miracle. Now, the second portion of this chapter, of this very difficult teaching, which I'm going to get to, is dominated by Jesus saying for the first time, I am. They say, I want a miracle, and Jesus says, here I am. They are wanting to be fed and nourished and uplifted, and Jesus says, I'm right here. He says it 4 times. He never says, I'm the morsel, but that kind of rhymed with miracle, and it's a little piece of bread. It's just a little nugget. But Jesus says that I am that morsel. And he continues in a similar sense, like John chapter 4 with the woman at the well. Whoever comes to me will never be hungry, or whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. Jesus uses the basic needs of life to teach us that we need him. And that's honestly where I'm at. I am realizing more each day how much I need him and how much sometimes I rely upon my own self, and it just always I always need more when I rely upon myself. And in this very simple and basic sense, Jesus is saying, you need this water, this bread. You need me. And in a similar sense, he also says, maybe you're in need of the miracle of rest. It's just, things need to slow down. Maybe you're in the you're in the need of a miracle of just not to be so heavy burdened. Jesus addresses that very human characteristic as well, that human experience. He says, come to me, all you who are heavy laden and burdened, and I will give you rest. All of this is reminding us that Jesus' miracles come in morsels, little bites, because there is a day of Sunday of rest and resurrection. That is a morsel, and we feed upon it today. There is that bread and that water that is giving for refreshing. So many different ways and different times Jesus says, really, the 4 times that people say, I want a miracle, Jesus matches it and says, I am that miracle. I am. Now, just like times before, we reject that morsel. Jesus, in this passage, speaks very difficult of how he's saying, you need me. And he doesn't say it arrogantly. Of course, he's meeting personal, very basic needs, showing to them that you need me. For me, it's David, you need me. You need God. You need Jesus. More each day. It's a very normal, basic need. I want to just talk a little bit about basic needs. We know this. Food, water, shelter. We need that. Air. Okay? What Jesus and God is saying is, you also have a very basic need of God. Period. And now he is offering that to us. I need a miracle. Jesus says, here I am. And of course, the response is, no, not like that. I want that lottery. I want that foot taller. I want that miracle, not the miracle of the morsel that you're offering. And of course, this is some of the questions that were asked. How can this man give us his flesh to eat? Very fair question. If you remember, This dialogue is within the context of the Old Testament, of which the people fed upon the manna that came from heaven. That's what this is all about also. The people in the Old Testament, in the days of Moses, ate that and they were satisfied. And then it'd fall down again. They ate that, they are satisfied, and so on and so forth, and it goes on. And so they're thinking that Jesus is going to send down manna from heaven. And he's saying, no, I am that manna from heaven. I am that bread of life. And so they're still thinking that, well, how are we going to eat his flesh? That's rather weird. I'm going to give you that. Of course, he's not talking about that moment. He is right now foreshadowing the Last Supper. I think we've got a picture. Here we go. Yes. It is in this moment that Jesus kind of culminates. This begins the Passion, by the way, so 12 hours after this, he's going to give up his body and his blood on the cross. And here he is demonstrating to them how this moment meets our basic need in a physical way of a physical reminder. Want to go back to I need a miracle? That word also is a sign. I need a sign. I need a sign. I need a sign that you are here, that I can believe in you, that I can trust you, that you can fulfill and satisfy my basic need of peace in my heart, rest for my soul, comfort for my mind. And Jesus gives to his disciples and says, his disciples actually say this is a difficult teaching. Who can accept it? Very true. This is why I wasn't going to take on that one passage. And I think sometimes we take on one passage and then miss the whole context. And then we get something that it's not supposed to be. Jesus says, are you also, this is to disciples, are you also going to leave because this teaching is too difficult, because you're not understanding? Are you also going to leave because you're wanting a miracle and I'm offering this morsel and it's not enough? We're going to transition briefly to the Lord's table. But before we do, I want to read a couple of John Wesley quotes, which makes our faith groups very unique. And I have been looking for this faith group for a long time. That is this Methodist interpretation of the Lord's table. Because as I read this story of the 5,000 that were fed, I don't recall Jesus saying, well, did you do this before? Did you do that? Have you done that? Do you believe this? Jesus opened the table and said, here I am, the bread of life. If you would like to participate in that, then you are all welcome. And I want to read this quote from John Wesley and I think right on, I think this is why some people hesitate to engage in not only the Lord's table, but really reject that morsel, reject that little nugget, that crumb of refreshing. This is John Wesley. One reason why many neglect Holy Communion is they are much afraid of eating or drinking in an unworthy manner. That's 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 29. That they never think how much more danger is when they do not eat or drink at all. I think that's brilliant. In other words, John Wesley is saying, this is something that the Lord has provided. It's going to be more harmful, I think, and John Wesley thinks. It's going to be, you're going to miss out on so much more if you don't participate rather than you do because you're scared or wondering or worried that you don't fit the criteria that sometimes we believe we ought to fit in. The whole point of this for me is recognizing that the miracles in our lives that we long for, God provides in subtle, simple ways each day, one morsel at a time. The question is, will we receive that? I want to be clear, I don't think anything miraculous happens here right now, but this is a way to remember God's word that says, do this in remembrance of me. So that when we get all worked up and scared and worried and we want the world to just be perfect, our world to be perfect and have that miracle, Jesus calms our storm and our hearts and says something like, one morsel at a time, one day at a time, this Sunday, mini resurrection at a time. And along the journey, I think the Apostle Peter recognizes that, and his response to Jesus saying, are you also going to turn away because this is not the miracle that you expected or wanted, or the miracle that you think you need? Is this morsel not enough? And then Simon Peter says, and I'm going to read, Lord, to whom can we go? You have the words of eternal life. We have come to believe and know that you are the Holy One of God. What Peter is saying here is, yes, this is a strange teaching, abstract. Yes, it's not necessarily the miracle that I wanted, but there's something special here. There's something stirring in my heart. In the sense of John Wesley, there's something strangely warmed when I hear the words from Jesus, or even in his presence, and I want more. Yes, it's just a morsel. It's very simple, but I want and I need more. My soul is longing for that.